Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia, bright and early on a Monday morning, looking ahead to the waiver wire with my good pal Jake Ciely from The Athletic. We're going to talk about some of the names that we saw that could help us potentially in Week 8. And Week 8, certainly a lot of teams won't be playing, so you're going to need a lot of help, a lot of depth. And luckily here at Fantasy Pros, we have all this depth too, because we have Jake Ciely joining us here on the team. And Jake, I want to start out first with Bam Knight. I want to start out with the Cardinals for a moment here, talk about this backfield. He's a player we talked about before. We can get to the actual other names to add in. But Bam Knight is a guy that we talked about previously. And it's funny because Jacoby Brissett under center looks very confident, played pretty well. Now, eventually Micah Parsons ate him alive, but Micah Parsons does that to a lot of quarterbacks, and credit to him. But I was actually on the Cardinals yesterday. Yeah. Got him on the points there. Got him in the first half as the leader, too, because of the Green Bay Packers having to wait on the tarmac for 6 hours before taking off. They were well behind schedule. These guys are creatures of habit. They were not in a good spot. Josh Jacobs was dealing with all sorts of issues with his calf and then an illness, too. Eventually, the Packers won out. But I want to talk about who wins out eventually with this backfield, because there's always this ominous feeling of Trey Benson's return. You have Michael Carter in this mix. So what do you do with Bam Knight at this point if he's still out there on the waiver wire and you can't play him this week?
Yeah, I think you still pick him up, but I think this might be a pickup and see if there's a needy team out there. Like maybe you have more fab left, maybe you have priority left, and you can go and you get him as a piece, because you bring it up, like all those reasons. By kudos to you for making that bet and having that insight. I actually didn't see that 6 hour news. I wish I would have seen it. I would have pulled off some other things and made some adjustments. You were right to do so. It really comes down to what brought this up before the show, as I said to you, is like, who really expects the Cardinals to be in the lead most of their games, let alone against the Packers? And you brought up the 6 hours, and I was like, oh, wow, I really wish I would have seen that, because that's the thing. He outtouched him, that being Bam Knight, outtouched him 7-2 with the lead, and then it was 9-6 when they were neutral, or they were slightly behind for a brief part of the game. So it was still 9-6 Bam Knight. But the idea behind Michael Carter was that 2-minute drill, passing downs when they're behind, he'll see more of a 50-50 split. And I think that's the concern, is that coming out of the bye, are they going to be in more games where they're either playing from behind or in a neutral script? And that's where you get to the 50-50. And this isn't Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. This isn't going back to the Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman days. This isn't one where you're like, oh, I want to start both of them as top 20 options. This is get the heck away while you can. So if you pick up Bam Knight, if you have him, as you just said, it might be tough to trade during the bye, but you can think forward to the week after that, because as you said, Trey Benson's like week 11-ish. And if he's ready to roll, I mean, that just throws both of them to, you can't use either at that point.
Well, I don't look at Benson as a completely viable option either. So if you have him and somebody wants him in a trade who already has parts of the Cardinals backfield, I would willingly move on, because I don't think any of us know exactly what that's going to look like by the time we get to the weeks that he is actually returning for the Cardinals. So let's start with, look, there's 2 running backs on this list today that we've been talking about in the offseason, been talking about slow burns. And I think a lot of us, including me, started to run up the white flag last week on them. The first one is Brashard Smith. I want to talk about him because now all of a sudden I'm up at the flagpole and I'm pulling the flag down. And once again, I'm excited about Brashard Smith. And look, rightfully so. Now, look, it was, that Las Vegas game got out of hand real quick. Patrick Mahomes didn't play in the fourth quarter. He had 14 for 39, but he also had 5 catches on 5 targets for 42. So let's talk about how Smith might be used here down the stretch, because Kareem Hunt is an older running back. Isaiah Pacheco still looks the same to me. I feel like he has more yards going up and down with his feet than he does going forward with his feet. I don't know if that makes sense to you at all. But let's talk about Smith here and his role with the Chiefs going forward.
I think the interesting thing is you brought up part of the concern is that Kareem Hunt got hurt. So if Kareem Hunt is out, this is kind of clears up one of the issues. But I will say, let's also temper expectations, because yes, we should be excited, but we can also potentially go too far for people out there that might be like, oh, I saw the box score. It was so exciting. Like, forget the garbage time. Brashard Smith has Jerick McKinnon appeal, but he's not quite Jerick McKinnon. So, because there's 2 things about him, is that Brashard Smith didn't see a single pass blocking opportunity, which shows that they probably don't trust him as such, where they would trust McKinnon as such. And there's limited goal line use for Smith versus Jerick McKinnon. So remember Jerick McKinnon, and he was an RB3 with weekly RB2 even. There was weeks where he was an RB1. There was weeks where Jerick McKinnon was giving 15 plus touches when they lost like everybody else and they were down to McKinnon. So I say all to say is, like, if Kareem Hunt is out, yes, Brashard Smith as an RB3 and half and full point PPR, but that's where you should temper your expectations, is that's going to be his range. If he gets a touchdown, he'll be inside the top 20, but this isn't going to be a complete timeshare where it's like, oh my God, I really need to start Brashard Smith as my RB2, but we are thin at the waivers at this point of the season. We are hitting the 6-team bye, and they get the Commanders coming up next week, which isn't as fearsome as they were like earlier in the season. Not that they were like, oh my God, avoid the Commanders, but they definitely haven't been playing as well recently. So I think that's why you like Smith. But I say that to caution also. Again, he's not going to all of a sudden be a top 20 running back.
All right, injuries had a lot to do with some of our suggestions here, and with Jalen Waddle injury and everything that's going on potentially here with the Miami Dolphins going in the bad direction. Let's talk about Malik Washington and how his role might expand over the week or two ahead.
Yeah, the bad direction for sure. Also, if you're watching this on Thursday, you might have news and this might be irrelevant. But as of today, first thing Monday morning, we were talking about this, there's potential no Jalen Waddle or Darren Waller, which now you're like, oh my gosh, who's left for the Dolphins? Good question. And they might trade who's left at this point.
Could be no coach by the time we get to Thursday.
That is true. Hey, 2 Florida coaches fired in one weekend. I put that in quotes, hopefully for Dolphins fans out there that happens. Sorry, all Florida fans. But I will say, like, it really comes down to Malik Washington is exciting. There was the excitement for Washington when Tyreek Hill got hurt, but obviously Waller stepping in, and just the fact that they didn't really need him and they turned to Achane in the backfield, and there's just nothing really left from Malik Washington. But at this point, it could go the way of the Commanders. It could go the way of figuring out who the next person was after Devontae Adams for the Rams, where the answer was nobody. And the answer is going to be, it's just a complete mess, and there's going to just be nobody here. It would be Westbrook-Akina catching a touchdown on every third catch like he did last year. But Malik Washington has the upside again, because if Jalen Waddle misses time, multiple weeks, 1, 2, 3 weeks, and you have no Darren Waller on top of it, they're going to need somebody to throw to besides Achane and Nick Westbrook-Akina. So that's why Malik Washington is here. But as I said, if you're watching this later in the week and Jalen Waddle avoided a serious injury and he's out there, it's also not the best matchup, by the way, with the Falcons on tap, but people need options. Again, 6-team on a bye because the NFL keeps screwing us over with this, Joe.
Always, every single time. Please don't even get me started about these bipocalypse weeks. It's totally unnecessary. Like, that's the worst part about it. It's like, we don't have to have everybody on a bye, certainly.
What's 32 divided by 4? 8. 8. Like, why can't we just do 8 weeks of 4?
No, because that would be sensible, and that would, make logic and all that nonsense. We don't like that over here. All right, let's talk about Oronde Gadsden here, tight end, who for the Chargers starting to emerge. Now, it wasn't just this big week here that he had in week 7. If you go back to week 6, he had 7 receptions on 8 targets for 68 yards. Obviously, yesterday, huge day, 7 for 9 for 164 and a touchdown. So this was the big coming out party. He is widely free in a lot of leagues right now. So let's talk about Gadsden here, because this is yet another tight end off the waiver wire in a year where the waiver wire is bearing some fruit at the tight end position for a change, which is really great. But what is Gadsden going to look like going forward? Do you think this was just a one-off based on what's been going on here with some of these guys banged up? Like, QJ hasn't been healthy much the last couple of weeks. Or do you think that Gadsden's really grown now into a spot where the rest of the season he is a main cog of this Chargers offense?
Both. How about both?
Okay.
That gift, you throw that out there. Look, it's not mutually exclusive to say that Gadsden is a tight end option, but also to say that let's not overreact and he's not going to be an every week option, because you just brought up, there's a couple things. They were down 23-3 in the first half and they threw 55 times. We're not going to see Justin Herbert throw 55 times every single week and have that opportunity. At the same time, even if Justin Herbert did throw 55 times every single week, he's not supporting 4 people. At best, he's not supporting 3 most of the time, as we already saw. The 3 wide receivers, Quentin Johnston was a thing, which meant Ladd McConkey was a non-factor. Ladd McConkey bounced back recently, but also Quentin Johnston got hurt. Somebody's always taking the back seat, and that's when I'm going to say this. If Gadsden's a true thing, and Gadsden, from this point forward, is a tight end 1, that means Johnston's probably taking the back seat, especially for the touchdown upside. But somebody of the wide receiver group is going to fall off. I don't think it's going to be Keenan Allen. So it comes down to Ladd versus Johnston. If you saw that game yesterday, Ladd had the most targets. Ladd McConkey, managers are probably frustrated with the outcome of 15 targets. But the point being here is that Gadsden's a threat to Johnston, and I don't think Johnston's going to completely fall off where it goes to this. Tight end outside of 4 people, basically, is going to be hit and miss every single week. You're going to get 50% good, 50% bad. So yes, pick up Gadsden. That's why he's number 3. Go pick him up if you need tight end help. You need tight end help with 6 teams on a bye. We're saying it again. You need tight end help because it's tight end, but don't expect them to all of a sudden, like if Gadsden goes out in week 8 and has 1 for 13, just keep him out there the week after that. And just like, until you have like, remember Juwan Johnson earlier this year? It was fun until the wheels fell off, but you just ride it until the wheels fall off. It's not one game, wait 2 or 3 games before you're like, I'm going to move on to the next one.
I think
and
the
don't
difference
chase your
though,
tail.
Jake, with Gadsden is that like, this is a rookie. So there's always that weird optimism there when you have these young kids, right? Where you go, okay, well, maybe it's just, tight ends, rookie tight ends don't all, show up like Brock Bowers necessarily. And you have a little bit more patience, right? So I think that's why this is shaded with a little bit more optimism. The guy like Juwan Johnson, who's been around the league for a while, and we've seen some one-off weeks from him. I think the difference with him was always Taysom Hill. They get in the red zone, all of a sudden Taysom Hill is involved in the gimmick plays and all that stuff, and it just kind of tight end equity for fantasy is built around the red zone. And if those guys aren't playing in the red zone, it's not a good look. One guy that is starting to play a little bit around there is the other running back that I teased at the top of the show here, Kyle Monangai, my guy, who Jake knows all I wanted for Christmas was Kyle Monangai to become the David Montgomery in the Bears offense. That's all I wanted. And guess what? That's what he did yesterday against the New Orleans Saints, 13 for 81 with a touchdown. Had a couple catches. I don't care about that. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the 13 for 81 and the touchdown. That's what I want, Jake. So he had never previously this season had more than 7 carries in a game. Now all of a sudden almost double that yesterday. Once again, I will ask this question. Is this a game script? Is this a approach against the Saints that they were just running? Or is this the future of what the Bears offense and backfield is going to look like with Monangai and Swift?
And once again, I'll give you a both. This is really what the interesting thing is. You just brought it up is you don't really care about the passing game. For everybody out there, like Joe wasn't being flippant in that, is that if you look at it and if you look at Ben Johnson, okay, look at Gibbs and Montgomery. What are they? Who replaces Montgomery? Or who is Montgomery? Montgomery does catch balls sometimes, but as Ben Johnson does with his running backs, the pass catcher is his lead, where like we've seen in the past years, where it's more of that first early down non-pass catcher and then the pass catcher complement. Basically, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears right now, even though Pollard can catch passes. But my point being is he's basically Ben Johnson's the reverse of what we expect with split backfields where one gets 65% of the work. And yes, Swift got 65%. Swift is still an RB2. Swift is still the running back that nobody wanted that's going out there and providing RB2 value. But now Monangai's in the mix, as you just brought up. And maybe the Ravens fix whatever is going wrong with that team during their bye. But the one thing they can't fix is the injuries on defense. And then maybe they get a piece or two back, but they are still highly exploitable against the run. So Monangai in a 16 bye, he'll be an RB3 this week in my rankings. I can tell you that already now. I know everybody's like, oh, who are you going to rank? It's Monday. It's too early. No, he will be an RB3 this week against the Ravens.
Yeah, and not only against the Ravens, but also when you consider how many teams are on bye, he is very startable this week. He's going to be startable as an RB2. And I know because I've got to start him in a couple leagues where I've had him all year, and I refuse to drop him. I tried everywhere to acquire Brashard Smith. I was unsuccessful. All I've done is just stash all my Kyle Monangai.
You know what's going to happen, right? What? Everybody's going to get back on the Chase Brown train against the Jets, and Monangai's going to outscore him this week. Watch.
It's not impossible, although, man, I think the Jets have just flat out just quit. I think it's done. I think it's over. It's not that it wasn't over already, but I mean it's over. Like you can't even start these guys now because they just have no fight in them. Tyrone Tracy, does he have any fight left in New York Giants? 9 carries for 46 and a touchdown, no target, so he wasn't involved in the receiving game there. Yeah, but at the same time, that was a. Well, I guess there's 2 ways to look at this. It was a very entertaining game, especially if you were a Denver Broncos fan. You love the end of that game. Giants fans, very frustrating to watch, but you still feel better about the Giants in that loss than you did about the Giants when Russell Wilson was still playing quarterback 3 weeks ago. That's
100%. I'm frustrated. As you know, I don't care about the Giants anymore. I care about the fact that 15% of the survivor picks were going to be knocked out, and the stupid Giants blew that. Thank you very much, band kickers as well on top of it. They get the Eagles again. It's not as appealing, especially if Carter's out there for the Giants. We know how much of a difference maker that he is. This is similar to seeing like Trent Williams being lost on the offensive line for the 49ers. It's a big impact whether or not he's playing. It sounds like he's going to be fine again this week as he's been back out there. So it's not as appealing going against the Eagles. But the reason I throw Tracy in there is just go grab him. People need running backs right now. And then what you just brought up was interesting. Most of those carries came in the second half too. And they had the lead until the fourth quarter. This kind of goes down to the Cardinals situation, is how many times do you expect the Giants to have the lead? Well, maybe more than you thought, as you just brought up with Russell Wilson. Yeah. So if you need running back help, and then the biggest thing here is what we already know. Yes, Tracy lost a job. He lost the job to Scadaboo. Whether or not because of his injuries, it's Scadaboo. We knew this was going to happen at some point. But if Scadaboo gets hurt because he runs like the effing juggernaut, at some point, Tracy could potentially have RB2 value because Tracy is one Scadaboo injury away from having this job back.
Yeah, certainly could be. Cam Scadaboo, though, I mean, he's invincible. Let's not pretend like he's not. All right, I hope so too. Before we get to a couple bonus guys, quick shout out to Waiver Central is the tool that can help continue your pursuit for a championship. So don't miss out on snagging potential difference makers like Kyle Monangai, potentially, and some other names we're talking about. Use Waiver Central at fantasypros.com/myplaybook, or just download the Fantasy Pros app so you can instantly view and all the suggested additions and drops as well for your fantasy teams. Real quick, Bayshall Tootin, Isaiah Davis. Going forward here, in terms of stashes, I definitely feel like Breece Hall should get traded. I definitely feel like we need to just tear it down, rip it all down, whatever you got to do. And that would make Davis useful. And then let's talk about Tootin as well. Jake, what are your thoughts on those two guys before we get out today?
Yeah, make sure you're stashing them. The big thing with Tootin is that might get overlooked now that the Jaguars aren't a bye, because we've talked about this before. A lot of times people go to waivers and cert by projected scores for the next week. He's not going to show up. But Travis Etienne was exciting. It was like, hey, he was the answer. And then all of a sudden, over the last 2 or 3 games, Etienne started to fall back off, and Tootin's starting to get back into the mix. And we know the explosiveness, and we know how many times that changes happen after the buys with rookies, especially if they're later to the midpoint late in the season. And I'm not saying Tootin's going to come out of the buy and take over, but a 50-50 split if Tootin's involved. And then if it continues, and then all of a sudden he does have the 60%, don't forget about Tootin. And then, yeah, Isaiah Davis, you brought it up. Breece Hall also was almost hurt, and out of that game he came back, but we have a Breece Hall injury history that whether injury or trade, Isaiah Davis could step in as only an RB2, because you mentioned like the Jets team is beyond miserable right now.
Yeah, it's certainly beyond miserable. That's a good way of describing the Jets, or as I like to call them, as good as it Jets. That's what I'm saying for everybody. It's just as good as it Jets. There you go. You're welcome, everybody. All right. So again, make sure you use the tools here. Don't be a tool, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, so we can help you continue all of your fantasy football championship runs. So subscribe to the channel. Drop your comments below. Who's your favorite waiver wire stash for week 8? And that'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Jake Ciely, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.